This morning's sign zone starts later than billed in some listings, with Panorama coming up shortly. First on BBC One, a later time for the skiing Weatherview with John Hammond.
Hello there. Well, of course, it's turned a lot milder back home, but we're now approaching the peak of the skiing season. You may be tempted to jet off and find some snow. The good news is that many of our alpine resorts, we've had some fresh snowfall recently, 30 centimetres in Andermatt, and over stateside, colossal amounts of snow. Mount Snow, in fact, has picked up half a metre of fresh snow just in the last day or so. Back to the Alps, I mentioned that many resorts have had some fresh snowfall. It's a good job because it's a dry outlook through the weekend and temperatures are somewhat higher now, so some of the lower slopes are going to suffer, I think, over the next day or so. Your best bet is to go to the higher altitude resorts or the higher runs indeed, where the snow conditions will be most favourable. Let's start off further north though, across Scandinavia, where the cold air remains well entrenched, so snow conditions very good, temperatures well below freezing. A milder interlude for the Scottish resorts, so the slopes are suffering a little bit, but the good news is next week things look like turning chillier and drier again. Down across the Pyrenees, again it's a dry prospect. We've had some fresh snowfall, but things settling down through this weekend, and as you can see that goes for many of our alpine resorts right the way across to Bulgaria as well. It's a dry prospect, but temperatures perhaps not as low as we'd ideally like. Plenty of skiing going on in Engelberg at the moment. Of course, it's got one of the longest runs in the world. The upper slopes by far the best conditions. Down to the resorts, because the temperatures are getting higher, it's getting a bit hard and crusty and a bit slushy in the afternoon. Garmisch as well is perhaps suffering a little bit on the lower slopes, but the upper slopes still have some fabulous powder conditions, and most of the lifts are open. Now then, in terms of fresh snowfall, as I mentioned at the start, many of our favoured resorts have seen good top-ups in the last day or so, and that snow is now going to last us through the weekend, and it's the higher elevations where the best of the powder will be. Down nearer the resorts, particularly low-lying resorts, it's getting a little bit slushy at times, particularly through the afternoon. The outlook through this weekend, as I mentioned, is mostly dry. Many of the frontal systems stay well to the north. Fresh snowfall certainly for Scandinavia, but down across the Alps and indeed over in Slovenia, where we've got the World Cup taking place this weekend. I think it's going to be dry for the ladies' giant slalom and indeed the slalom. And again, down near the resort, I think it could be quite crusty at times. Now let's go over to North America. We continue to have a cold plunge across many of our eastern resorts. Further west, we've got fronts affecting the northern Rockies as mild air tries to push in, and as that mild air encounters the cold, we're going to see a lot of snow, I think, across many of our rocky resorts over the next few days. Certainly, as we start off in the north, you can see the next set of fronts pushing in, so any dry, clear, sunny weather on Saturday probably won't last all that long for the likes of Banff and Fernie. There will be plenty more snowfall later on this weekend. Further south and towards the California resorts, we could actually do with some fresh snow. There hasn't been all that much so far this winter, but I reckon there's going to be plenty over the next few days as those fronts continue to push in. The Big White, of course, is the second largest resort in Canada, very unpretentious resort, great skiing, particularly on the higher level slopes, but most, if not all, of the lifts will be open through this weekend. Now over in the east in Killington, it's quite a low-lying resort, but because the air is so cold, no problems at all. We've got powder on the upper slopes, the lower slopes, and again, most of the lifts remain very open indeed. Fresh snowfall, well, there's been loads of it across many of our North American resorts, and as I mentioned, in the Rockies there will be fresh snowfall, I think, through this weekend, which is going to top up the powder in most of our destinations. So wherever you're going this weekend, enjoy your skiing. I think you're going to have lots and lots of fun. Weather-wise, of course, as ever, check out the details on our website. That's it from me. I wish you a very good night.
If you're driving in rain, think.
My job is just to get your father back alive.
Believe me, Detective, they all wanted the old man dead.
You can't do this to me. No one can handle a kidnap without a ransom.
Do you have every confidence?
Zen continues Sunday at 9 on BBC One. Catch up on BBC iPlayer. This morning's Sign Zone programmes are later than billed in some listings, which means Countryfile will be shown at the new time of 2:45. Also at a new time now on BBC One, Panorama.